Hello, hello, and welcome to Break Check. It's your one-stop shop for RL Esports coverage and discussion. And today, we're going to be talking about the Fall Major. Went down in Sweden. And it's the first international event in 2 years. A lot of hype, a lot of excitement. I think the teams were very much looking forward to this. The players are very much looking forward to this. And I know as a fan, we were all very much looking forward to this as well. And it did not disappoint. It was very entertaining. It was very exciting, full of drama, full of unexpected outcomes, and just overall it was a fantastic event, super fun. And I think the most exciting thing is when now that it's over and we've had time to let it sink in, right? The hype has slowed down a little bit, it's died down a little bit, but now what we recognize is this is just a major, right? We have 2 more of these, and then we get to go to a world championship. And, everyone cross your fingers. Maybe we'll have crowds at one of these events. But I know I am super thrilled with this new format. We had the introduction of RLCSX, but we were region locked. And so I feel like we didn't really get to experience the new format. And this is kind of our first taste of what this new format brings to us as consumers of Rocket League Esports. So, like I said, super exciting. And with that being said, we're just going to jump straight into it. So I think the Swiss stage was a lot of fun. There were 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, of games. We had some surprises. We had FaZe Clan going 3-0, not dropping a series. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, that's not a surprise, but I do think that for many it was. FaZe was a team that showed a little bit of inconsistency throughout the fall split. Obviously, they came in hot, got that dub in Regional 1, but then struggled to recreate that type of dominance. So many people were a little concerned what FaZe was going to show up, right? We also had Dignitas going 3-0, and I don't think that surprised anyone. What is surprising is they did not drop a single game. They go 3 series. They take Tokyo Verde 3-0, they take down Envy 3-0, and they take down Semper 3-0. And it's one thing to do it in a regional. It's one thing to do it in Europe. It's another thing to do it when you're facing the best of the best from around the world. And so that was a very, very impressive feat from Dig throughout the Swiss phase. We also had Sandrock Gaming. Sandrock Gaming was a team that I think a lot of people were really excited to watch play. There were some that were saying they could compete with the best. There were some that were saying they're overrated. You maybe shouldn't speak that way about them until we see what's happening, until we see what they can accomplish. And, man, they came out swinging. They punched G2 in the mouth 3-0. The very first series that Sandrock got to play on the international main stage, they take it to a strong G2 roster. G2 had been improving throughout the entire fall split. It was a team that I think a lot of people were backing moving into this event. If G2 could replicate the performance that they had been showing in Regional 2 and specifically Regional 3, we might see G2 in the top 4, maybe even win the event. And then Sandrock, Swiss stage, first match, they say, we about to take it to G2. So that was really exciting. For me, if I had to pick a favorite series throughout the event, and some people probably, different fans are going to have different opinions, but my favorite series was the SRG series where they take G2 down 3-0. And the reason it's my favorite is just because what it means for that region, what it meant for those players, how exciting it was for just Rocket League fans as a whole. Because, again, there was a lot of anticipation for this Sandrock roster. Lots of rumors. They've competed in some European events, and they've had some some pretty good results against some of these top teams. So it was exciting to see what they would do when they were on the main stage. And they did not disappoint. They ended up taking down G2. They fall to Semper in the Swiss stage, and then they take down Furia and Ground Zero, who are both too strong. Those are two strong teams that did well throughout the Swiss stage. So really excited to see Sandrock perform well. Another team that performed well is Complexity. And one thing that I want to mention about those two teams, so we got Dig 1, Phase 2, Sandrock 3, Complexity 4 throughout the Swiss stage, with Sandrock and Complexity going 3-1. Sandrock is from MENA, which is a minor region. Complexity, yes, they're representing North America at the moment. There's a story behind this roster. They are a South American team that moved to Mexico so they can compete in North America and get more high-level competition. There are some other really great players in South America, but the competition, the depth of the talent pool is more shallow in South America. So they moved to North America to, and it's a gamble, right? You know, many people were raising their eyebrows at that Complexity move. You know, I think a lot of people felt like, hey, you're in South America, you've got a free ride because this team is very good. You've got a free ride to most majors. If you move to North America, you may not get to the majors. You may not get to these international events. And Complexity, they took a gamble. They believe in themselves, and they prioritize improvement, which I have a ton of respect for. They prioritize improvement. They wanted to get better, so they moved to North America. And anyways, my point is Complexity from another minor region. Yes, they're in North America, but they're from SAM. And so I want to, you know, tack that on the board for a moment and just keep that in mind, because later on in the podcast, I do want to talk about these minor regions and just reflect on that. We've got Sandrock in number 3, Complexity at number 4, moving through to the top 8 through the Swiss stage. And Complexity did not have an easy run either. They take Game 1 is BDS. They take them to Game 5. Round 2, they face Era. Round 3, they take Envy down. Round 4, they take Semper down. So it's not like Complexity had a light run. And I shouldn't say easy, because it doesn't matter who you're facing at this event. It's not going to be easy. We move down to BDS at the number 5 spot, moving into the top 8. And they also finished 3-1, a little bit worse record. BDS, a very strong performance as well. I think they were a team that was ramping up throughout the event. They ended up doing better as time went on. They took down Complexity, took down NRG. They fell to phase and then took down Endpoint in the Swiss stage. Then we had the last 3 dropping in to the top 8. We had NRG, Endpoint, and Semper all going 3-2. And NRG and Endpoint were 2 teams. They were the number 1 seeds from the North American and the European regions. And they were 2 teams that I think a lot of people had them safely making top 4. I think many probably had them in the finals. I know I did. And it's very unlikely that things shake out in the most predictable manner, like the number 1 seed from the 2 major regions making it to the finals. Of course, that is unlikely to happen, but that's what I predicted, because those 2 teams had shown the most consistency in their respective regions. So I thought they would show up and play well in this event. And unfortunately, I think both of them very much underperformed throughout the Swiss stage. You know, NRG had a very slow start. They had a relatively competitive series with Era, who I think most people would give the nod to NRG in that matchup. Then NRG falls to BDS, and then NRG falls to Endpoint. So NRG in the first 3 rounds is facing elimination. They had to fight back, and fortunately they did. They end up taking Vitality down in a perfect sweep. So not only did they go 3-0 in games, they did not allow Vitality to score a single goal. Okay? That is a way to bounce back after having 2 losses. Then they go down in round 5, and they go on to take down Ground Zero Gaming. We got Endpoint off to a slow start. They fall to Renegades. We've got the number 1 European seed falling to the number 2 Oceania seed. And I think many, if not most or all, would not have predicted that. So Endpoint, again, off to a slow start, but they're able to bounce back. In round 5, they take down G2 to qualify for the top 8. And then we had Semper. And I actually don't really think Semper had that weak of a Swiss stage. They had a very competitive route into the top 8. And while they did fall to Dig and Complexity, those are 2 high-quality teams. And Semper played, in my opinion, pretty well throughout the entire Swiss stage. They were a team that I was not super confident about moving into the event, and Semper, I think, proved me and probably a lot of others wrong. So we're going to move into the bottom 8 here. We got G2 and Ground Zero. G2, Ground Zero, and Renegades all making it to round 5. One thing that I want to note here, just like I did with Sandrock and Complexity, we've got 2 OCE seeds, or the 2 OCE teams, excuse me, making it to round 5, making it further than some of the European and North American teams. So, again, these minor regions are performing pretty well when you put them on the international stage. I'm really excited for the Oceanic region too, because they're definitely a region that when they were added to the equation, they got off to a slow start, and I think a lot of people even now still are kind of counting them out, saying that they don't really have what it takes maybe mechanically to compete at this level, and we are seeing massive strides in the correct direction. I would not be surprised to see one of them pop into the top 8, or if they're really playing well and the mechanics are on point, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go even further later on throughout this RLCS 21-22 season. The losers in round 4, we have Furia, South American team, South American all-star team, or superstar team, whatever you'd like to call them. That is probably the 3 best players in the region. And unfortunately, I do think that this is a lackluster result for them. I think Furia is a much better team than only winning 1 series in the Swiss stage. We saw them in some events and some scrims before the LAN took place when they were in Sweden. And Furia they look dangerous. They look really good. They're a very fast-paced team, a very mechanically talented team. And I think that they will bounce back. I think them and probably many other of the teams were just maybe caught off guard a little bit by how nervy they were, which is totally understandable. Again, this is the first international event, the first LAN in 2 years. We also have Vitality and Envy dropping out in the 4th round of the Swiss stage. And Vitality has not performed well throughout the fall split. They've been very shaky. So I think it's not terribly surprising. But at the same time, when you have the caliber of players that you have on Vitality, I think you expect, especially with the experience that they have, I think you expect a little bit better from them. And if the roster remains and does not make any changes, I would expect a little bit better performance. They may not be a top 4, top 5 caliber team in the world right now, but I expect them to improve their performance at least somewhat from this event. Envy is one that I think is shocking. Envy, I think many people were predicting them to make a top 4 or even win the event. The only win that Envy got was a Game 5 win against Ground Zero. And they did not even look very good in that series. After they take down Ground Zero, they fall 3-0 to Dig. They fall 3-2 to Complexity. And then they fall 3-1 to G2. And again, these teams are high-quality teams. You're not going to face any weak ones once you get to this level of competition. But it was disappointing to see Envy not be able to bring their A game. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think a similar sentiment to that, to my previous point with Vitality. I don't feel certain that roster is going to remain the same. Never know what is going to happen. So we'll see how that unfolds. And then in the last 2 spots, we've got Era Eternity and Tokyo Verde. And both teams, unfortunately, were not able to get a single series win. The Era Eternity, they played some competitive matches against NRG, Complexity, and Vitality. They take Vitality to Game 5, end up falling. And Tokyo Verde, unfortunately, was not able to win a game. I think it was pretty apparent that they were outpaced, a little bit outclassed. But I do expect that region to catch up quickly. I do expect that region to improve quickly. I think this experience competing at this level against these teams is going to help accelerate their growth. And I think for many of the players in the APAC region, seeing Tokyo Verde on that stage is probably going to motivate them and drive them to just push harder and grind harder. So that's kind of how the Swiss stage unfolded. Again, I think there were some surprises. Unfortunately, Envy falling out early was a little surprising. Furia only getting one game win was surprising. G2 not performing well, a little bit surprising. FaZe showing up and going 3-0, surprising. Sandrock, I don't know if we want to call it surprising, but exciting at the very least. And Complexity as well. Maybe not surprising or whatever you want to call it, but definitely exciting. So, Swiss stage. 3 days. Lots of Rocket League. Really fun. The next thing on the docket is the minor regions. And I keep doing this because these minor regions are showing that the top talent in these regions can compete with the top talent from anywhere in the world. Like I said, we start with APAC, and yes, they are a weaker team. But I think they are very close to some of the lower tier talent at this international event. I don't think that APAC is so far behind that they can't compete. And I expect them to continue to get better as this season unfolds. SAM, I think they are certainly stronger as a region than many expected, especially when you consider the fact that Complexity is really a SAM team. Now you've got 3 teams that are competing with the best in the world. Furia specifically, I think, is a team that will continue to improve. They've got loads of experience on that team. They've got the mechanics. I think they are going to be very threatening. I think they could be just as good as a team like SRG, and I think they will most certainly end up in the top 8, if not better, in one of the remaining majors. We move over to MENA. I mean, incredible. SRG looked so good. They were taking it to any and every team. They were extremely competitive, very fast-paced, very mechanical, very consistent, incredible offense. The firepower on that side of the field is absolutely insane. And incredible defense. I think those players being strong 1v1 competitors, benefited them tremendously. It was something that Greg had mentioned throughout the broadcast, many times, where these players that are 1v1 warriors, they are used to these high-pressure, high-intensity situations, and I think he's exactly correct. One note to make about SRG is they did not have Khaled. Now, I don't think Senzo is much of, if at all, a downgrade, but the roster composition is going to look a little bit different as long as Khaled is able to attend these remaining majors, and for all we know, SRG could be even more deadly. So, MENA, very strong. OCE, looking stronger than ever before. Again, like I said, that this is a region that many are still counting out after multiple seasons of being included in RLCS. And, I think they're in a very tough spot. You've got your South American region, which they can queue in the North American region servers. You've got your MENA region, which can queue in the European servers. And then you got the OCE and the APAC regions, which don't have as populated of servers. So there's less high-level talent, high-level competition for them to play. And I think that has definitely hindered growth. But OCE, again, making strides in the correct direction. Both teams in the 5th round of Swiss. And quite honestly, if Renegades had just cleaned up their shooting a little bit, I think Renegades the top 18. So, again, OCE looking better than ever before. Now, before I move on, I do want to show something really quickly, because this is specifically why it's so important to expand these regions. This is why it's so important to give these players from smaller regions or underrepresented regions or underfunded or whatever you want to call it, why it is important to give these players the opportunity to play on the main stage. This is a short interview from Realize. Realize is a player from the APAC region, plays on Tokyo Verde, has been around the scene since the very beginning.
選手と今までずっと言われ続けてきたわけなんですけど、その最高の選手になったのはいいんですけど、その次がない。で、その勉強だったりとか、その進学のことだったりを考えると、そのゲームをやめるべきで、なんかそうですね。ちょっとすいません。やめるべきで、その普通に将来働いて普通に暮らしていくべきなのかなって思ってたんですけど、やっぱりそのいつでも RLCS のことが頭から離れなくて、その自分の人生の目標はこれだなってずっと思ってたんで、そうですね、本当に苦しかったです、正直。
So I wanted to show that really quickly because it's a moment of vulnerability, and I think it gives us just a little bit of an idea of what it feels like to be a player that is pouring your heart in to something that you're so passionate about for, over 5 years. And you just don't know if you're really going to ever have a chance. I think many assumed or expected that RLCS would eventually expand, but nobody knew, and the players didn't know. And you can see from the emotion that he's displaying just how much it means to him. I have nothing but the utmost respect for that player and all players that have been pushing themselves with no end goal. We've seen similar sentiments on Twitter from players of different regions. I know Senzo from MENA has mentioned things like that. And again, I think it's very important that Psyonix expanded, and it's absolutely incredible that these players are now given the chance to just show their worth and hopefully able to justify pursuing their dreams. I wanted to show that for a moment and just, again, reflect on why it's so important to allow these other regions to compete. So we're going to move it to the playoffs here. And I'm just going to walk through really quickly the quarterfinals. The first matchup we had was Dig Semper. Second matchup we had was Complexity BDS. Third matchup we had was FaZe Endpoint. And the last matchup was Sandrock NRG. Match number 1, Dig Semper. Semper ends up taking down Dignitas in Game 7. Dig got the better of Semper in the Swiss stage. Dig got the better of everybody in the Swiss stage. But Semper turned things around. And Semper looked incredible. They really did. They looked incredible. They were the better team. They deserved to get that victory. Match number 2, Complexity versus BDS. BDS, as I said earlier in the podcast, BDS is a team that was heating up as the event went on. And they looked stronger and stronger as the event went on. And that stayed true to form right here. They take Complexity down 4-2. Then we got FaZe and Endpoint. And this is a match that I predicted incorrectly. I thought Endpoint would get the better of FaZe. But FaZe looked really clean against Endpoint. They were very fast. I think they had suffocating pressure. The chances that Endpoint did get, FaZe dealt with it well defensively. And they take down Endpoint 4-2. And then last, certainly not least, NRG versus SRG. And NRG ends up taking the victory 4-2, but it was a very competitive series, very fun to watch. And again, I think SRG is just getting started. Another reminder, they are playing with a sub. And again, I did say this before, Senzo, I don't think is a drop-off. I don't think he is a player that makes that roster worse by any means, but we can't ignore the fact that that's not the player that they've been playing and practicing with. So when they get Khaled back in there, I would not be surprised to see an even better performance. So In the top half of semis, we got Semper versus BDS. Again, BDS continuing to heat up. They take down Semper 4-2 in a very commanding fashion. Then we got FaZe NRG. NRG take down FaZe in a very commanding fashion, 4-1. So we have NRG, BDS. This is what everyone has been waiting for. RLCS champions, NRG, or for the North American region at least, NRG. We got RLCS runner-up for the European region, BDS. BDS did fall to Vitality in the championship, but BDS's dominance throughout RLCS cannot be overlooked. I think they were certainly the best team in the region, and many were beginning to write them off. They fell just a bit short against Vitality in the championships. They had not been able to win a regional just yet, though they have had fantastic performances. Top 2, top 3. And like I said, they were being written off. This is something I talked about a lot on my stream before this event. I think BDS is a team that has like championship pressure, even though they have not placed at the top of everything in quite a while. And so BDS, they kind of had, they had that monkey on their back, right? And they wanted to get that off. And so we'll talk about that in just a moment. Right now, what I want to do is I want to reflect on this EU versus NA. This was a very hot topic. This was it was the storyline throughout the week. On the broadcast, it was brought up all the time. On Twitter, that's pretty much the entire timeline. And it's fun. It is fun. And I think this is why the international events are so important for players and for fans. Because there's more to it now. People have this regional pride. You're competing against teams from other regions. It's exciting. And over the last 2 years, there has been so much back and forth about NA, definitely the best region. EU, obviously the better region. This and that, and no one could prove anything conclusively. So I think a lot of people were looking forward to this LAN for that specific reason. Now, one thing that we got to talk about here is the World Championships and how the teams, how it's determined what teams will move forward to the World Championships. It's very different than we've ever seen, and it rewards regional consistency throughout the entire season. Okay, so we have 3 majors, and basically your average top 8 performance as a region will determine how many spots you auto-qualify, how many spots your region will auto-qualify into the World Championship. There are going to be 8 slots up for grabs for auto-qualification. And in this first major, we had Europe with 4 in the top 8. We had North America with 3 in the top 8. And then we had MENA with 1. So I think, again, it's fun to discuss, and it is fun to disagree. It's fun to discuss and go back and forth and argue about who's better. But I think conclusively, we just have to give the nod to Europe. Obviously, they had 4 teams there. I think overall, even if you evaluate the Swiss, Europe performed a little bit better, at least more consistently as a region. NA looked a little bit weaker. And, I think the approach is for North American players, fans, we do whatever. But North American players, if they don't like it, they need to work harder. And I think they will. That seems to be the general sentiment on social media. And, while we're talking about this EU versus NA and just being motivated, I think this international event has lit a fire under players, both players that were at the event and players that were at home. Many players, I think, were beginning to kind of lose that fire, lose that passion, because it was the same thing over and over and over for 2 years. You're just playing the same people. You're not getting to, go meet players in person. You're not getting to, try to prove yourself on the world stage. You're just stuck in your region. So, again, I'm really, really excited. I know there are players that have already tweeted out that were here at this event saying they're not satisfied with how they played. They want to work harder and they want to perform better at the next event. And I've seen players tweeting from home saying how much this has motivated them to want to get to that stage. They want to get to this major, and so they're going to work even harder. So I think, as fans, we are the ultimate winners here because the players, again, their drive, their passion, their desire to win, their motivation has all been increased tremendously. So now we'll jump into the finals, and then my few takeaways from this event. The finals was BDS versus NRG. Again, this is something that I think a lot of people have wanted for a long time. I think if you were to ask the majority of the community from both regions, who do you want to see play each other? I think the answers would probably be BDS versus NRG. And BDS ends up taking NRG down in 2 series. The first series, 4-1. BDS absolutely dominated. Now, don't get me wrong, the series was competitive. NRG did not play poorly by any means, but BDS was absolutely the better team. Series 2 went to Game 7, and there was a shift in mentality for the NRG players. In Series 1, you could tell that they were down and frustrated. In Series 2, they just loosened up. They relaxed. They started laughing. I mean, they were getting scored on, and they're like full teeth showing, laughing, huge smiles. And it's something that we've seen with Endpoint, Metsonoris specifically. Endpoint has had great team chemistry and team environment throughout this fall split, and we've seen it work wonders for their team. And so NRG, the first series is 4-1, and they're kind of down. I mean, maybe even mopey a little bit. And then we bounce into Series 2, and it goes to Game 7 because they're able to shake this off. They're laughing about mistakes, and they started playing a little bit better. Now, BDS was on point. They looked incredible. Offensively, they were absolutely suffocating. They were doing a fantastic job with resource management, resource starvation. They did a great job of commanding the midfield, cutting off things before NRG could escape the stronghold. BDS did a fantastic job of punishing when there was a mistake, when there was a gap in the defense. And BDS did an incredible job on the defensive side of things. They were very organized. I think when they were being starved, we talked about resource starvation. When they were low boost, I think they did a fantastic job with communication and individual execution to handle those tough situations. And again, like I said, BDS deserved that win. They were the better team, and they showed it on the biggest stage in our Rocket League history to date. So, hats off to BDS. And although NRG did fall to them, I think we need to give some credit to NRG as well. They had a really slow start to the tournament, and they were able to slowly turn things around. Big shout out to Squishy. I think without Squishy, NRG may not have even made it out of Swiss. He played absolutely incredible throughout the entire event. And I don't think that is indicative of NRG's best performance. I think they can definitely bounce back stronger, as I think for many of the teams in this event. So, my final takeaways, I think the big one is we do have to give credit to Europe. They had one more team in the top 8, right? So we have to give credit there. They ended up winning the event. We have to give the credit there. I do want to make a footnote there that I think NA is hot on their heels. And I want to make another footnote here. I think every region is hot on their heels. I think there is a much smaller gap between all teams at the top of their region than most viewers understand. So these minor regions may not be so minor. And North America and Europe, I think, are very competitive at the top level, at the top tier of the talent of the region. So my takeaways, again, every region is probably much closer than we recognize. I think this has been fantastic for player drive, player motivation. I think it's been a lot of fun for viewers and fans. We get content that we haven't seen in years. Everybody cross your fingers for a crowd at an event sometime this season. Maybe just the World Championship. If that's the case, that's phenomenal. Other than that, I appreciate you all hanging out. Appreciate you listening. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will catch you next time.